Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is author Nancy Lloyd. Nancy earned her Ph.D. in Transpersonal Psychology from Delphi University in Georgia and has been involved in the study of discovering and creating a whole brain approach to life and business for many years. She enjoys teaching and coaching others individually and in group workshops to unleash the power of the mind. Nancy's current book is Quantum Leadership: Dare to See Things Differently. This book will offer you clear and concise information and suggest how to create changes in yourself and your organization or business. It guides you to see things differently. It offers you a foundation for the changes you desire that can be used, practiced, and explored. The conversation with Nancy was delightful and very informative. And to kick the interview off, I asked Nancy what made her sit down and write Quantum Leadership. And here's what she had to say.
My personal background and my professional background intermingle, obviously. Grew up what I call middle-class American, small town, that type of thing. But I was also, my mother said I came out challenging the world. And so I was constantly challenging, parents and teachers and preachers. And I had questions that just weren't being answered. And so imagine what it was like being my parent. It was always challenging. So, but I learned through my childhood to just look at things differently. My mother was very much into positive thinking and those kinds of things. And so that's what I learned. And at the same time, I knew I was on the path from the time I was 5 years old, knowing I was going to be a nurse. That was it. There was no other options in my life. And so, I started with all of that. And at 18, I had a crisis that sort of cemented all of this for me, in the fact that I was beaten up and sexually assaulted, and, it was just not a very pleasant experience, obviously. But out of that, most people would be saying, why me, that kind of thing. But I'm a challenger. I'm saying to the universe, why do these things happen to some people and not to other people? How does life work? Are there things like a method? Is there a plan? Is there a formula? There's got to be something to why people get what they get.
Right.
And so I just kept working through that kind of thing and asking those kinds of questions. Things kept coming to me all through my professional career also. I moved up through nursing very rapidly. By the time I was 34, 35, I was director of nursing at a major teaching and trauma hospital. And I didn't even have my master's degree. It required that at the time, but it was just everything flowed. Everything fell into place. At a certain point, though, it was about 3 years into all of that, and I crashed and burned. I just totally burned out. I was lousy at what I was doing at that point. I was a good manager, but not a good leader. And I ended up getting fired. It was like, it was awful. At the time, it was absolutely awful. Yet again, I'm asking more questions.
What did you attribute, Nancy, to that crash and burn?
I was working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day.
There you go.
And so I was so exhausted that I didn't have the wherewithal to be using the very tools that I know how to use. My body was falling apart. I literally was falling apart. And so it was a crisis.
Okay.
That I knew I had to move on. And it was a blessing that I got fired. It really was, because it led me to the next thing in my life, where I call it my semi-retirement position that I've been doing for 20 years now. And I was working part-time. I was, and still am, working with people at what I call the grassroots level of leadership. I'm training, I'm teaching, I'm coaching. I'm more authentic than I've ever been. Because, one, I have the time and the energy to do it, and two, I'm doing something I truly love. You know, that other job I wanted from the time I was 15 years old. I wanted that status. I wanted that paycheck. What I forgot to say was that I wanted to enjoy the work.
Right.
I mean, I did great things, but it just wasn't enough, and I couldn't keep giving at that level.
That's a very common thread in the workforce today, where people are chasing the material aspects of the job, and they're not going inward to understand what it is that they're supposed to be getting out of it from a personal perspective.
Exactly.
How are they supposed to grow, right? What are the lessons? Instead, they approach it almost in a robotic type of way.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, and that's exactly what it felt like, and it just wasn't me. I felt like I was literally coming apart at the seams. You know, the real me wanted to be someplace else, and the physical me was standing here in a job that I didn't want, I didn't like. So I literally created the way I left. It's interesting, I put that in the book, that I literally thought about all the benefits of being fired. And I fantasized about it. I really did. And then it happened, and then it hurt.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that part. You know, it was a blow to my ego. Of course it was. But you know, I guess it's like the one-armed alligator wrangler. You learn as you go.
Yeah.
You know, it's just when you crash and burn, you'll pick yourself up and you'll figure out what you're good at, what you're not necessarily good at, because you need to have focus as to where you're going. And I sat down and I wrote out a whole list of what I wanted out of my next job. I wanted to be appreciated. I wanted to have enough time to be able to be me too and live a balanced life. And I wanted to be well paid for what I was doing. I wanted to work part-time. I wanted to be helping people. I made a whole list.
I was just going to ask you how you went about doing that. So you sat down and you wrote a list out and you said, here are the things that I want to get out of this. Not what they want to get out of me, what I need to get out of this.
Right. And I found the perfect position. You know, it's not always a straight line. I ended up, you know, doing something else, which then led me to the position that I have now. And, you know, for many years it has been just exactly that. And I wanted to be able to use everything that, you know, I was bringing to the table. So it didn't matter what my title was. I was able to offer a great deal more than anybody else probably in the company, you know, with that position title. Because I had it to offer and I was willing to offer it.
Yes. So then what happened? Then was this the background, the inspiration to write the book?
You know, it was, because I offered so much and did so many extra things that my boss would then be saying, well, can you help other supervisors? Yes, I wrote a supervisor's manual. I did classes. I did all sorts of things. And eventually I got the attention of the district CEO. And at one point she said, you know, you are such a good teacher and you have such a wealth of information. Why don't you write a book? You know, the light bulbs go off. And you're like, you're right. Why don't I write some of this stuff down?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, what's interesting is you talked about all the challenges that you had and then changing direction. And there are so many people today, Nancy, that I speak to that are struggling with the same things that you struggled with. But the difference is you were able to sit down and say, okay, what's my next step? How do I invest in myself? How do I get the most out of it? Many people are just stuck. They can't figure that piece out. So what recommendations or suggestions would you have for folks that are essentially caught on that hamster wheel? They feel like they can't get out from a job that they don't like, that, you know, they feel like they're being abused from the standpoint of the number of hours, the lack of pay, and so on, and they want to make a change, but they look at you and they say, I just don't know how to do it. So what would you recommend for them?
You know, I catch myself sometimes saying, I don't know how to do that. And then I think, wait, yes, I do. I do know how to do that. I just don't know the steps right now. So in other words, you forgive yourself for not knowing, and then you just start saying, this is what I want, so let's just see what leads me there. So I take it step by step. I'm very intuitive. I've always been very intuitive. And so I think, especially when you're in that grind and you feel trapped and you feel abused, number one, I sit down and I have an attitude adjustment with myself because they are paying my paycheck. I do have valuable work to do. I do like the people that I work with. There are many things that I like about my position. There are other things I don't like.
Right.
I don't like other people scheduling me my time, those kinds of things. So I do an attitude adjustment so that that's kind of like the middle road. So you're negative, and then you move to the middle road by finding a little bit of appreciation, and then you move into what is it I really want to do?
Right.
Well, you may not know the title of what you want to do, but you know what it feels like.
So they need to direct their thoughts and their intentions in a certain place. In other words, if these are the things you want to get out of your life, whether it be work or something else, I would assume, you have to put your thoughts and then intention behind it. In other words, it has to be kinetic. You can't be a spectator. You have to be a participant in your life to achieve the things that you want to achieve. Is that the gist of what you're saying?
It is. It is. I mean, I can sit here and say, I put in my time, Lord. I went and bought a lottery ticket. but that doesn't work. You still have to put in a little effort here,
Yeah.
So you just keep moving forward. I sometimes say that I need a surge protector between my brain and my feelings, sometimes between my thoughts and my feelings, because there's often a thought that brings up a feeling, and I'm like, wait a minute. I don't want to feel that any longer. So that's my surge protector. It's like if you have an expensive piece of equipment, electrical equipment, you put a surge protector on it.
Yeah. Yep.
So that when you get those big jolts of energy coming through, it doesn't destroy the circuit board.
Now, the book, and I'm going to mention it, Quantum Leadership, Dare to See Things Differently. When you and I spoke offline, you said the book was geared toward the corporate world.
It is, because that's where I saw the greatest need.
No, and I think there's a great need to be had there. So what are the things that you see in the corporate world that need to change in your view?
Well, in the book, I talk about energetic intelligence. And so, I'm talking about let's wake up. We need to be more lucid as to the changes in energy, period, as to, how the earth is now, vibrating and how we are putting off energy. I mean, we all put off energy every day. Say that to a business person and they're like, what? Well, let me explain it this way. What your energy is putting off in your thoughts and your, feelings and that sort of thing comes back to you as a boomerang. So whatever you're putting out there, you're getting back. If your business isn't doing well, that's probably a reflection of what's going on inside.
Yeah.
So I talk about, the energetic intelligence and that you need to know about it. It's like gravity. It affects us whether we know it and can describe it or not. I mean, it affects us. And so does this energy. So we have to start working on the inside to start changing what the outside is going to look like. I find that the business world is so left-brained. The logical, the linear, all that sort of thing that it makes good managers. They're grounded in facts. They're organizing. They're making things happen. But I also find them saying but to issues instead of and.
Right. I was just going to ask you about the corporate culture suppressing the whole aspect of creativity in the right brain, and you just answered that. Because I have a corporate background also, and you're right. I mean, the whole left brain discipline, it makes for good management, dot the I's, cross the T's, follow the process, that type of thing there. But what I found was what's lacking is problem solving is not where it should be, because left brain orientation doesn't really lend itself to the creativity aspects. And so what I've seen in my career, where I used to work, I saw a lot of that lack of creativity. And whenever problem solving did arise, what I found them doing was not coming up with a clean sheet of paper and coming up with new problem solving techniques. What they were typically doing was brushing off stuff that they used in the past. They were regurgitating in many ways. And so, I mean, at least that's my perspective. And what I'm saying here, being a little long-winded, is the corporate world needs more organic creativity, and I wasn't seeing it.
Right. I have this great example. It's kind of like, so now you're in the corporate world and you've got this big vault, okay? And it has one of those combination locks on the front of it. Well, the left brain goes in there with hammers and everything else, drills, whatever, to try and get the answers out of that vault. Because that's where all the answers are, is in that vault.
Yeah.
Now, if you get the right brain involved, the right brain just sits there and waits to be invited. It's just not going to attack the left brain, although sometimes they really are in competition with each other. But the right brain, says, okay, when the left brain gets exhausted, which it does, okay, it gets totally exhausted using the same old techniques and the banging and the hammering and all that sort of thing. And so then it just relaxes and says, okay, I give up. I don't know. And then the right brain goes, here's a stethoscope. If we just put that up there and listen quietly, we can do this, And then if you engage that right brain enough, you create the genius brain, and the genius brain simply says, 2 turns to the right, stop at 6.
Yeah.
And then goes on and gives you the combination. But you're right. All the solutions to the problems are locked up in that vault, and there's no way the left brain can get at it. I mean, Einstein said you cannot solve a problem using the same thinking you used when you created it.
Exactly. There has to be a balance, the right brain, left brain. And the thing that was getting to me when I was in the corporate world, and I spent 32 years there, is that instead of becoming aware that they have to utilize more of their right brain functionality, they were actually going more left brain. I had to figure it had to be by design, because at the end of the day, what they were looking for were obedient workers versus actual creative problem-solving human beings, At least that's my perspective on it. And I know it's not like that everywhere, so I don't want to receive a rash of emails from my listeners saying I'm generalizing, but that's basically where I was. That's what I was seeing.
Yes, and a lot of that is based in fear, because when I started this work in transpersonal psychology and that kind of thing, so many people are terrified to look at their own emotions, their own thoughts, their own feelings, and so they're going to go to what they know, what they see, what they can touch. They know numbers. They know, I had a vision of one hand holding a pickle jar at the bottom and the other hand tightening the jar at the top. And, at a certain point, you tighten, and either the hand breaks or the jar breaks.
Right.
Either way, you still got pickles to deal with. So...
Yeah, it's truly. I think the book is fantastic, addressing this whole situation with the corporate world, because in my practice, I see a lot of people coming in that are dealing with levels of stress and anxiety which nobody should really have to deal with. And one of the big reasons why they have this stress and this anxiety in their life is because a big variable is work. It's the number of hours. You'd mentioned that earlier in your own career. People are putting in 60 hours a week, 65 hours a week. They're being told that it's work-life integration, which essentially means your work is your life is your work. The word balance was removed from the equation. And so what's happening is it's just putting enormous amounts of pressure on people and on their families. Are you seeing the same thing? Are those the types of things that you're addressing?
I am seeing the same thing, but I have to... when I focus on certain pieces of my work, it's the politics that bother me more than anything else. And yes, they're controlling me. However, and because, we're in a very regulated industry. However, I also have a great deal of human contact, which is where I absolutely shine. I just love customer service and dealing with people. And so, sometimes it's a matter of focusing on the things that you have control over as opposed to focusing on things you don't have control over. Because the ones you don't have control over are not going to change, and you're just going to get more and more frustrated with it. The things I do have control of is the parts that I really, truly can enjoy while I'm doing it. And so that is where I create the balance. But so many people don't know how to do that. We are taught from the time we're children to be looking for what's wrong with things. When you're a CPA and those kinds of things and an auditor, you're looking for things that are wrong. When I'm reviewing forms, I'm looking for what's wrong. And so you're trained to do that, and so then we start looking for what's wrong. But, the whole medical field, they're looking for what's wrong. Well, if they look for what's wrong long enough, they'll find something wrong with you, whether you're feeling fine or not.
Right.
So, so much of it is having the time or using tools that can get you over that negativity, that control, that frustration. I put several things in the book about, there's just times when, like if it's hot out, I wash my hands in the coldest water I can get. It changes, believe it or not, it changes your physiology and it changes your attitude.
Right.
If you clap right in front of your eyes, like clap really loud, like 3 or 4 times, it will change. It's like opening the clouds or something. It can change your attitude. So there's little things that you can do to save yourself, is what I call it, because the corporation is not there to save you. They're in business to, make money.
Exactly. You mentioned, I just want to stick on this a little bit because it's very, very important. You were saying that people are trying to control what they do not control. And this causes enormous frustration. And I see this too. And part of the problem, if we put it back into the corporate world as an example, how many times in the corporate world have you heard, you own the whole problem, you own the whole issue? And many people will take that in and say, I own all of this. And if you own all of it, the mentality tends to be, then I have to be able to work every aspect of it, which means I have to control everything within that issue or that problem, even though in many cases there are many aspects within a problem or an issue that you have absolutely no control over.
Right.
Right, and this causes incredible frustration.
Yes, because you never truly own anything like that.
Exactly.
However, there's just, I'm constantly, I have to work on myself. I'm constantly redirecting myself to say, wait, now you're focusing on what you can't control. Let's focus on what I can control. And so much of that was, even if there were other aspects, I found, and have found for many years now, that when I work well with others, they actually supply me with what I need faster, easier, better. They will serve me before they'll serve other people.
Right. I found the same thing.
Yeah, because if you go in with the right attitude, if you're a ray of sunshine in all the clouds, who are they going to gravitate toward?
The ray of sunshine.
Yes.
Yes. Now, this is very, very fascinating to me. So Nancy, have you been able to present this to levels within a corporation or corporations? And if you have, what has been the feedback?
Well, certain aspects of it. I have a wonderful boss who listens to me. And interestingly enough, it's like I can see changes. My particular center is now making goals, and we're the only ones in the nation making goals. And that's because my boss and I work on what it is we want.
Okay.
instead of, what it is we don't want. We're all living with frustrations, but we keep focusing on what it is we want. And so we just play that little game. And there's other things. I did a workshop it was combined sales and production staff, and it was called Wild Wacky Wishes. And it's tearing goals apart that are meaningless, basically. Most goals are written to impress. They're not written to express what needs to be done. And so we would take the key parts out of, like a key word, out of every goal or strategic strategy or something like that, priority. And then we would create 3-word goals out of that. So if we wanted, and they all had to start with the same letter or say at least the same sound. So what it does is it engages your left brain and your right brain at the same time. So I had these people, and I would hand them something like, finance or finances, and they would come up with things like, wow, we want flourishing finances or flourishing financial funds, or, they kept putting these kinds of things together. And within about 3 minutes, there was laughter. People were, and they were working in little groups, but then they were beginning to shout out, words to other people. And so, this whole group came together with probably, in about 15 minutes, they came together with about 100 different ones of these, with laughter involved, with creativity involved. I had to rein them in at one point because they were so loud, they were disturbing people in the other rooms. And so, you're engaging right brain and left brain creativity. You're focusing. If goals, words don't teach. Words really mean nothing. If they don't produce a picture or a feeling, they're really nothing. And so we created pictures and feelings with these things that we were putting together.
That's
and it
excellent.
Really brought the group together.
That's excellent because it makes the goals more embraceable, right?
Oh, yeah.
Versus just a bunch of words written on a piece of paper, which most of the time people just glaze over.
They do. And most of the time, I can't tell you how many, annual, mid-year, whatever, coaching, sessions that I would have with employees, and I would say, all right, now, this is your job position. You've been in it for some time. I want you to tell me what this position, how it relates to the corporate goal. And, it'd be the glazed over deer in the headlight look.
Right.
Because they don't have a clue.
No.
So, and so I'd have to coach and coach and coach until they could figure out what their part in the big pie was.
And I think a big problem is that many corporations, especially large corporations, they're very poor at disseminating their strategy and explaining it.
Yes.
It gets created, at the top of the mountain somewhere.
Right, and which is why I said it's written to impress.
Right.
Let me impress you with my position. Let me impress you with my words, whatever. But it doesn't express what they really want us to know.
Right, and what they push down is not an understanding, a thorough understanding of the strategy, like you said, because it's done to impress. What they push down is just execute, just do this, just do that. And so people are basically put in, this robot mode of just doing, executing, without really understanding what their work or what they're doing, what does it tie to at the end of the day? Mm-hmm. What's it attached to?
Yeah, we actually, in our monthly meetings, I would say probably at least every 6 months, we have a whole program on why we're doing what we're doing.
That's great.
And who we're affecting. And that's attributed to, me working with my boss.
So she embraces it.
She embraces it. And she is the only one. There are 5 other directors, and every single one of them has been fired and replaced in the last year and a half. But she remains because we're making goals, because when people come to our center, they visit our center and they'll say, gosh, the atmosphere here is just totally different.
Yeah. Yep.
It is possible.
It is possible, but the management really has to embrace this. And it's difficult because many of these managers have come through the rank and file, so they've been in this system, they've been in this process for so long. They adopt all the corporate buzzwords, all the cliches. They regurgitate talking points that have come down through corporate presentations or corporate podcasts, whatever it may be. But they're not thinking through how they can do what your boss is doing, which is to, okay, look, I'm getting this information from the top down. Now, let me tie this all out so that I connect the dots and it makes sense to the people here who are executing, doing the work, so they have an understanding of why their work is important and why we're doing what we're doing. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people in the corporate world and I said, I'm doing this, but I have no idea why I'm doing it. I don't even know who's going to even look at this report. But they're working on it, you know?
Yes. I do those too.
Yeah. And,
however, the biggest thing for me is I keep going back to, who's in control of my mind? I can choose.
right.
I can choose to be a part of that, or and it's not easy. I'm telling you, it's not easy, to set yourself aside and, decide that you're going to find the best way to do things, or you're going to find some creative way to do things. But what I found is, like I said before, everything's a boomerang. The better off I am on the inside and what I'm putting out, I get treated differently than other people.
Yeah.
I am offered things that other people don't get. Even in the corporate environment, I'm absolutely, stunned sometimes because they'll pay, Nancy, could you do this? Sure, I can do that, and it's other people are like, how did you get that? Well, it's a long discussion.
It's interesting. To me, what you're referring to is causality, cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. Every effect has a cause, right?
Yes.
And if you're going to take a very negative approach to things, a very sour approach, then what's going to happen is negative, sour stuff is going to circle back. You called it the boomerang effect.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what's going to come back to you. And I try to talk to people about this all the time and try to get them to understand you must change your way of thinking, because if you don't, the cycle that you're in that you don't like to be in, it's going to persist because you're actually creating your reality.
Oh, yes.
Based upon what you're holding on to, what you're clinging to. A lot of people don't get it.
Well, it's really interesting. I went to a seminar one time where it was just, I didn't know anybody there. You're like from out of town and you just show up and a whole bunch of people, and it's, a self-improvement kind of thing. And the first thing the instructor said was, would all those in the healthcare field please stand up? Now, most of these people didn't know each other. We're from all over the country. And believe it or not, there were about 20, and they were all grouped together.
Okay.
And the same thing with teachers. The same thing with, public servants. They were basically all grouped together, didn't know each other, but gravitated there because of the energy. Gravitated by what you're putting off, whether you know it or not.
Yes.
So it makes sense to start paying attention to what you are talking about, what you are thinking about. I catch myself periodically in a rage about something. Fortunately, it's, usually me talking to myself. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I don't like how I feel at the moment, and this isn't doing me any good going over and over and over it. And so then I'll just, look at that sky. Isn't it beautiful? Look at the trees. Aren't they really great? I have to talk myself out of it. I have to distract myself enough.
No, actually, I absolutely get it. It's another thing that folks will talk to me about. They'll say, hey, I'm trying to be a better person. I'm trying to be more positive thinking. But, Mike, I hit these days where something happens at work or something happens at home, and I get angry, I get emotional, and they think that these emotions that they go through, that they shouldn't have these anymore. And what I explain to them is, no, you're being a human being. You're going to have these moments. You're going to get angry or you're going to get upset. But the trick is is what you were just saying. You have to get yourself refocused and reground yourself and make that shift. Try to make that anger, whatever it is that you're going through, try to make it not last long.
Right. One thing that I think was probably one of the biggest lessons I ever learned, because I grew up with a stoic mother and grandmother. So, you had feelings, you just sort of sucked them in, and you just went on and did what you needed to do. And it took me years to finally really get in touch with my feelings, and then it was a matter of, when people say, I couldn't help myself, I can't help the way I feel, that sort of thing. Well, we all know that's baloney, or we should know that's baloney. Because I finally learned that emotions are just emotions. You don't have to hold on to any one of them.
Right.
They are always fleeting if you will allow them to be. Feel them to the deepest that you need to feel them. There are times when my cat's getting used to it. I scream because I just instantly am angry about something, and I scream out, and then I let it go.
Yeah.
Okay, over that. Now, how am I going to deal with this? How can I put a better spin on this?
Right, exactly. Well, it's interesting you should bring that up, because I had a client recently, and they came to me, and it was about anger. They had some anger issues, and had to do with their relationship, and they came to me and said, I want to release this anger. I don't want to be angry all the time, and so on. So when we started doing the work, it came down to they had to release the anger. In other words, they had to stop holding on to something that happened years ago. You just have to let it go. You have to release it because you want to feel better. And it's amazing to me how even after doing all the work that it's so ingrained that they won't release. They want to hold on to whatever it is. And sometimes I wonder, is that because it's an identity issue? In other words, if I let that go and I release it, a part of me which I identify with, that I try to get other people to identify with, is not there anymore, so therefore I have an identity crisis. It's a very interesting dynamic to me. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yes. I mean, I've done a lot of clearing work, and I spent, one whole week doing it and I was dealing with anger. And, at the end of it, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, now, wait, if I don't have all of that, who am I?
Right.
If I let go of all of that, because, when you get angry, it's because something is going against a belief that you have. Investigate the belief. What is that belief? What are you holding on to so tightly? And usually it's ego, or, like you say, it's, if I let go of that, who will I be? Well, who would you like to be?
Yeah.
There's the key. Who would you like to be? Because you can choose to be anything.
That's so key. It's so key. So many people do not focus on who they truly want to be.
Right. They don't have a clue who they want to be.
Yeah.
Or how they want to feel.
So how would you suggest, is it what you told us earlier in the interview, that they should sit down and write a list and say, look, these are the things that I want to do with my life. This is who I want to be. I want to accomplish X, Y, and Z. Is that one approach? How would you suggest somebody who feels stuck right now, Nancy? They feel like they're in quicksand, but they want to break free. They want to break loose. They want to be in a different direction. How would you suggest they go about doing that?
I don't think you can kind of jump right in when you're feeling that badly. I don't think you can kind of jump right into a specific topic like that. So I would start with, okay, just like I was saying before, I would start with a list of, I really enjoy blue skies. I really enjoy the fact that I know the sun's going to be there every day. I know that every night there's going to be dark. Certain things that they just can't deny. Certain things that are going right in their world. I know I have a roof over my head. I know I have air conditioning. I know I have, and be grateful for those kinds of things. And then start working into, and I'd really like more of this, and I'd like more of this, and this is how I want to feel, and this is who I want to be. And, you sort of build that ladder, I guess.
All right.
So you have to start with general things off the topic, because you can't do that quantum leap. It just doesn't work. You can't go from feeling horrible to better, you're on two ends of the same spectrum, but you can't just make that big leap. You've got to work your way up through it.
So an incremental approach.
Yes.
Take it
So
incrementally.
you start with a general and then go more specific. And when you get more specific, if it starts feeling bad, you back up and you go more general.
Okay. I guess the premise would be that the little wins or the little positive movements lead to achieving a larger goals down the line.
Absolutely. Let me tell you a story. I used to race sailboats, and there was this guy that always beat me, and he just, that just kind of really irked me because we were the, front of the pack. But so one day I sat him down and, bought him a beer, and and I said, I want to know, what is it that makes you so much better? And he said, the winds are always changing. He said, but if you're aware of the winds that are changing, it's the person who notices it first and makes the small adjustments that wins the race in the end. Because they make the small adjustments quickly, and then, they win the race. And he was very sorry he told me that, because I won the next race.
Okay. Well, it's a great analogy.
So it is. It's just that little tweaking here and there. Do you set the sails? Do you readjust your, where the boat's heading? What are you going to do?
Yeah. I think that's excellent advice. It's the little things. I tell people life is like standing on a piece of graph paper. And right now, let's just say you have both your feet in a particular box in that large piece of graph paper. And all it takes to change your life is to take your foot, doesn't have to be both feet, either step to the left or right, forward, backward, or diagonally. And now you're in a different position on that graph paper.
Mm-hmm.
And because you're in a different position or in a different box, your life will change. You'll have a different reality. So many people, they do not know how to step out of that box. It's just like their feet are nailed to the floor there, and they just are fearful of moving or fearful of making a change or fearful of being adventurous. But you have to be a little adventurous in order to make change in your life.
But you can do it incrementally.
Yes.
Because you're in fear because you think that's always going to last. I'm stuck here. I can't do anything about it. But when you start focusing on where you want to go, if you're stuck in quicksand, it's not really good to focus on the quicksand. You really want to focus on, the grass on the other side, or somebody who can help you. There's always people. It's just amazing to me that I meet certain people unexpectedly, and it's like, oh, there's my answer. Oh, there's my next step.
Right. So that's the other thing that people need to understand. You're exactly right. There will be people who will come into your life, enter into your life, that will help you to manifest these changes.
Oh, yes. People, things, events. It's just amazing. I traveled all over the country the last couple of years doing some site support, and I met wonderful people wherever I went, but there were times when, I was just kind of like lost in an airport.
Right.
The signage wasn't good, and I'm just standing there, and some man comes up and he goes, "Are you looking for ticketing?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "They took down all the signs. Isn't that silly?" He said, "Come with me. I'm headed that way." He was right there.
Yep.
People are always there to help you if you will allow them. But you have to be open with who you are. You can't live in that fear and expect those people to approach you.
And open yourself up, because many times the signs and the help are subtle.
Oh, yes.
Right? So if you're going to camouflage yourself, if you're going to lock yourself in, and you're not going to pay attention, you're going to close down your intuitiveness, as an example, then this help, which is always around us, you're not going to see it, you're not going to feel it, you're not going to sense it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
One of my psych teachers many, many years ago said, "Smile at everybody you meet, because they could be your next best friend."
Yeah.
If you're not smiling at them, they're certainly not going to want to be your friend.
Right. Right. You have a happy disposition, folks. Don't be so grumpy.
But that comes in increments, too.
Yeah, too many grumpy people walking around. So, Nancy, we'll pushing toward the end of our interview time here, and I just wanted to just tell us a little bit more about where the audience can pick up a copy of your book.
Well, it's available on Amazon. Is probably the easiest place. It's available by actual book, and there's also ebook available. You can get it at most any retailer, but you're going to have to order it because it's a print on demand. They don't typically carry those, but they're happy to, get them for you. So it's really easy to pick one up, and it's not a big book, folks. Business people do not have time to read big books and a lot of stuff, So I made it the footnotes copy, basically.
How many pages is it?
It's really, 111, 112?
Oh, that's great.
Maybe 125, whatever.
Okay. That's very, very readable, folks.
It is, and it gives the nitty gritty. It gives you the fine points, and I also make suggestions at the back if you want to dig any deeper. My recommended reading is called Daring, More Daring, Even More Daring, and Hold On to Your Hat Daring.
Okay.
Because you need to be able to see things differently. If you're going to start manifesting differently, you have to see things differently.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I think it's a great book, especially considering what many people are going through who work in the corporate world today. A lot of people are struggling. They have questions. The waterline is right above their nose. They're trying to figure out, hey, is this all that there is? Am I on this treadmill, this hamster wheel for the rest of my life, whatever it may be? And you have this book which is going to help them to understand that they can step off that hamster wheel.
Right.
And that this life they have at work doesn't have to consume them. That they can bring that balance into their lives and, quite honestly, they can enjoy themselves.
Yes. I have one more story I can tell you.
Oh, great.
I'm not a person who likes being in the water. I like being on the water. But my roommate convinced me. She was dating a new guy who had a boat, and he loved to water ski. And so my roommate said, go with me. I don't know him that well yet. Go with me. And so, okay, whatever. So I get there, and she listens to the instructions, and she ends up falling 10 times before she can even get up on the skis. And I'm just very intent. I listen to the instructions. And so when it's my turn, I get right on up on those skis, and I'm just doing really, really great. But then, another boat comes by, and the wake hits me, and I fall. And I keep hanging onto the rope. And I'm going up and down like a serpentine, trying to grab air, when I'm coming up, and then I'm diving some more, And it's like, I'm sorry. I was waiting for the instructions, right? I didn't get those instructions. And so, finally, intuitively, it was kind of like, look, you're either going to drown or you're going to let go of this rope and bob up to the top. Oh, yeah. What an idea. So, folks, sometimes you just have to let go of the rope a little bit, bob up to the top, get a new perspective.
And use your intuition.
Yes, let your intuition work. It's not just all left brain instructions. Sometimes you have to go with that intuition.
Yeah, I tried water skiing many years ago, and it was a total disaster. I spent most of my time with my head underwater.
Yes, well,
being dragged by the boat.
And I'm not the smallest thing in the world, and so by the time they got me into the boat, I felt like a beached whale. It was the last time I went water skiing.
Well, at least you got up. You did more than I was able to do.
Yes.
Well, Nancy, this has been an absolute pleasure. It really has. I know I'm glad we connected at the expo, and like I said, I think your book is very, very timely. And folks, the name of the book is Quantum Leadership, Dare to See Things Differently. It's Nancy Lloyd, Ph.D. I highly recommend. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at other retailers. Pick up the copy of the book. 125 pages. It'll make a big change in your life. So, Nancy, I guess, do you have anything else to add before we conclude?
No, I ask myself all the time, though, how does it get any better than this? Because sometimes that's an affirmation.
Yes.
And sometimes it's a plea for help. You'll always get help if you ask for it.
Right, and life is dynamic. So once you start thinking it's
yes.
static, don't do that. It's dynamic.
No.
Right, right, exactly. All right, Nancy. Well, I really appreciate connecting. I really appreciate your insights, and I hope your book does really well.
Oh, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this.
Okay. And we can catch up again sometime in the future.
All right, that'd be great.
All right, Nancy. Bye-bye now.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
And that concludes my interview with Dr. Nancy Lloyd, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Nancy's book, Quantum Leadership, Dare to See Things Differently, can be purchased at Amazon.com and other online and retail outlets. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. And if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.